Welcome to episode 4 of the Pigskin Project. And me and Ryan were able to get a special guest on. Uh, Chicago writer, his name is Erik Lambert. He's with us today.
Erik, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you doing?
Fantastic. We are very excited to have you on the show this week. When I remember telling Ben about, the potential of maybe even getting you on here, and we both were ecstatic. It's a pleasure to have you on here. And with that, we're going to transition to the questions that we have for you before we get started into our typical, weekly news and week in review and stuff like that. So Ben, what do you have for Erik as far as what you'd like to know?
The first thing I just want to ask or put out there is, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are?
I've lived in the Chicago, northwest suburbs pretty much since I was 2 years old. I was born in Albuquerque, and it's the funniest thing. I really didn't get into football until I was in high school, in terms of watching it and whatnot. And I didn't become a Bears fan until probably around the early 2000s. So I was kind of a late start in that regard. I didn't really grow up with that. I was more of a Chicago Bulls fan because I grew up in the 90s. So, that makes sense. And the funny thing is, my dad introduced me to the Bears in terms of my fandom, but he grew up an Eagles fan. So it's kind of a weird dynamic I got going in my family in that regard. But, I started writing about the Bears probably around, the early 2010s. And, I got into sports mockery around 2013, give or take. And, I've been working there ever since. And I just sort of been, getting more and more involved in writing about every aspect of the Bears. Offseason is probably my favorite just because of all the, the different ways you can construct a roster, construct a coaching staff, all the pieces fitting together, getting into a season. I'm always fascinated by stuff like that. So I sort of started writing about the draft at Fansided. And after a while, I sort of stepped away from there and committed myself full time to sports mockery. And, now you see the man you see in front of you.
That's funny that you say your dad was an Eagles fan as well, because that's a dynamic me and Ryan have on this podcast. I am also an Eagles fan.
Oh, very nice. I bet you were a pretty happy camper a few years ago.
Yes.
Hey, we don't have to talk about that. Ben, what else you got for him?
But as you said before, you're a sports writer. You write about the Chicago Bears all the time. I was just interested in what your favorite piece that you've written about them is.
Oh man, I'm always fascinated about the higher up sort of stuff, GM, how all that process works. I've always been very fascinated by that and how they approach an off season, when they're aggressive, when they tend to be a little more timid in their approaches. And I remember a while back, I wrote a piece about one of the Bears' top executives, Mark Hatley. He used to be sort of the de facto GM of the Bears from 1997 to 2000. And I looked back on his entire tenure, and it was just so fascinating how it sort of went through this whole roller coaster of emotions in terms of, it started out so poorly with a couple of really nasty first round picks, Curtis Enis and whatnot, some really rough ones. And then his final year of the draft, he lands Brian Urlacher and Mike Brown in his first two picks, and it's easily his best draft. And then an off season later, he gets fired, and it's just like, man, it felt like he was just starting to come into his own, and then he gets canned in favor of Jerry Angelo. It was just a fascinating story that I sort of broke down in detail. And Dan Pompei, who is somebody I really respect, ended up retweeting that article on Twitter. So that was a really cool moment for me. So yeah, that's one that always sort of sticks out with me.
That's awesome. And again, you were just talking about how you were, you like the off season and you like the higher ups of that sport. So I was wondering what your opinion on the coaching hire was, because I know personally, I really wanted an offensive guy for Justin Fields. I was a big proponent of Ryan Leftwich, but just what are your opinions on Eric Bieniemy?
Eric Bieniemy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just read a tweet. Matt Eberflus.
Matt Eberflus.
Sorry.
Actually, initially I was a little bit intrigued by Eberflus because I really liked what he did in Indianapolis with his defense. And the more I read up on him, the more I liked him, because I watched a lot of clips about how he goes about his coaching and whatnot. And not only did he come across as a motivator and an energetic sort of guy, but he came across as actually a really good teacher. And that's something I always look for in a really good head coach. Can they teach? And that was a problem I always felt was an issue with Matt Nagy. It didn't feel like he was the best teacher when it came to it, not just his offense, but, football in general. He had great ideas, but he didn't know how to teach them properly. And that doesn't seem to be an issue with Eberflus. He comes across as just a good, solid football coach. And he's been doing this for 30 years. So he's very much prepared for this opportunity, unlike Nagy, who was probably thrust into that role a little before he was ready. So I like Eberflus. I get he's a defensive background guy, and you've got Justin Fields. You prefer to have an offensive guy overseeing his development, but it looks like Eberflus has this good plan in mind. He understands the type of offense he wants to run. He understands the person he wants to run it in Luke Getsy, and they want to run a Shanahan-style offense, and they're hiring a bunch of people who understand how to run that offense. So it looks like they have a good plan in place, and I think Fields would be a great fit for that offense because of his mobility, because of his ability to run off play action, bootlegs, and all that sort of stuff. So this is a good plan. And I think Eberflus is the sort of coach that would fit this city. He's tough, he's gritty, he believes in effort and passion and all that sort of stuff. So I think the hire in and of itself is very sound from the Bears' perspective.
And what do you guys think of your guys' offensive coordinator?
It's the fun. People are always looking for, the established guy, somebody who's done it before. And I totally understand that. But you also have to understand that you usually find more success when you look for that young up and coming guy who's hungry, but also a little bit experienced. And Getsy fits that mold perfectly. He's been up and coming for a while now, got a little bit of play calling experience at Mississippi State, did pretty well. And then he had 3 highly successful years as the passing game coordinator for the Packers, and getting a chance to work with an established MVP type quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. He understands how to manage that position, how to manage the personality of that position. It's very important. And also his ability to mesh different types of offenses. He came up with Joe Moorhead in college. He learned that type of spread style offense. And then he learned something completely different with Matt LaFleur in the Shanahan style offense. So that'll give him a good sort of broad stroke in terms of what he can put together for Justin Fields, working to his strengths and sort of trying to hide his weaknesses until they can start to work around those weaknesses and maybe turn them into strengths down the line. So I like the hire. He's clearly young. He's clearly hungry. And I always like that in a football coach. So I really like the hire.
Yeah. Ryan?
That's oh man. So coming from a Bears fan's perspective, Erik really knows how to get Bears fans to want to run through a wall, man. I can't wait for next season. It's going to be great. Kicking off with my questions, man, what do you think is the most challenging thing about your job?
Staying focused on the task at hand. In terms of my line of work is it can be difficult to make money in, because writing in general, you really need viewership in order to get paid decent wages for this. So I've always had to keep myself focused on writing at this many articles every day. And in my personal viewpoint, you need at least 5 or 6 per day in order to make an established income. And then always staying engaged on Twitter, doing this every single day, and just staying engaged with the fan base. People always tell me that they're really happy that I engage with them on Twitter. And there's a reason I do this, is because I like doing it, obviously, but also because I think it's important, because it keeps you in the public mind, and then sort of using my articles to sort of feed that, because that'll bring the viewership back in turn. So it's sort of a cycle thing I've learned over the years to sort of establish myself, and then just incorporating things here and there, my own podcast, getting on other people's podcasts like this, just to, spread the love of the Bears, and also just, let people know that this is not just my job, but it's also my passion, which is, you don't do something as involved as I do without loving every second of it, which I do because it can be taxing at times. There are days where I'm completely exhausted and my brain's completely fried and I have no idea what I'm going to write, throughout the course of the entire day, but I have to sort of hammer my head against the wall in order to get through it and just get it done, because you never know, even something you consider crap in terms of what you write might actually get decent viewership. It's just a question of maintaining that focus throughout, a 365-day calendar.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you did bring up, interaction with fans and stuff like that on Twitter. I did want to bring up because, I was just explaining to Ben before you got into the call, how exactly I got to, contact you and, start to understand the type of guy you are. For anybody listening that hasn't talked to Erik directly, he's a great guy that really does, like you said, interact with people as much as he can, not just because it's part of his job, but just because it's something that he loves. I think that Erik is definitely somebody I would call an inspiration to what I'd like to do. And I'm not just saying that just to, make you blush or anything, but definitely something that I had thought about prior to getting into the whole, college scene. I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do. So, being able to talk to Erik about, how I could get into this profession and, with him telling me journalism is the way to go, it was almost like kind of like a calling in a way. And so, in a time that I needed it, it was definitely something that I really, really appreciated too. But with that, if you don't mind telling people, any kind of advice that you would have for anybody that wants to get into this type of field of work.
Well, I try to tell people this as often as I can because I made the mistake of not doing this, is that be sure to take journalism in college, because I feel that would be an absolutely crucial way to get opportunities, because I didn't get a lot of, frontline opportunities with certain, ventures. I explored, sort of internships at the Sun-Times, the Tribune, just to sort of try and get my foot in the door. I came close a couple of times, but I think my lack of a journalism background really worked against me. I had a writing background. I took fictional writing, for a bachelor's degree at Columbia College in Chicago. And then I went back for a master's in the teaching of writing. And I think that really helped me sort of find my own voice in terms of how I write my articles. And I think that sort of worked for me. But I do believe if I had gone back in time and told myself, be sure to take journalism and all that sort of stuff, I absolutely would have and should have done it, because I think that would have helped me. So I try to tell people the same thing, find ways to take writing in college, journalism, creative writing, because all of that can help you in various ways. And the other thing I try to tell them is this line of work is tough. You need to be able and willing to grind, because that's what it can be for a lot of these young up and coming types of writers. Most writers don't have salaried positions. So you're directly lined up with how much views you can bring in if you want to get paid doing this. So you have to be prepared to grind every single day, write decent articles, and then sort of feed those articles into social media and engage people on them. And that's sort of what I've learned to do over the past several years.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then, lastly, you did say earlier when Ben asked, you said that the off season is something that you really like to write about and think about, just because, the pieces of the team and, the organization. With that, do you think you can give us a slight preview for what you think would happen in your off season for the Chicago Bears?
To me, it's all about reallocating resources. The Bears don't have a lot. They've got 5 picks, no first round pick. They have 43 million, give or take, dollars in terms of salary cap space, but that's not a lot because they've got a lot of in-house free agents they need to juggle. So they're going to have to be very judicious about where they spend their money and where they spend their picks. And to me, it's pretty simple and straightforward. You've got Justin Fields. He's on his rookie contract. You don't have as much time as you think. So you need to build around him. You need to devote as many resources as possible to giving him the best possible chance to succeed this year and moving forward. So I think they're going to focus heavily on the offensive line. I think they're going to focus heavily on wide receiver because they're really weak at those two areas. So knowing Ryan Poles from the research we've done and how he's talked, I think the offensive line is going to be a heavy focus this offseason in free agency, maybe a trade and in the draft. And then they're going to sort of try and piece together some weapons for him as well. So they might do, certain things at cornerback, which they do need help at. Absolutely. But, they've got pieces on defense to be still a pretty good defense this year. They're going to have to rearrange at linebacker because it doesn't really fit the type. I think Roquan Smith's going to be a member, but they got 2 other positions with a shift to the 4-3 that they're going to have to do. And then I feel they've got a good defensive line presence with Mack, with Quinn, but they really need to worry about the defensive tackle spot. They probably should bring back Bilal Nichols. I think he's going to be a great fit for the 3 technique position. So I would work on that. But offensively, they really need more work, not just in terms of coaching, but in terms just in terms of talent, because I think they're lacking at wide receiver and offensive line, especially.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of solid points. And, I know you can't really go too in depth with it on the spot, but I'm really looking forward to that article whenever it comes out. But with that, we're going to transition into the week in review. It is a short week this past week because it was only conference championship matchups. The Rams ended up beating the 49ers 20-17 at home to make it the first ever situation where a team plays at their home stadium in both the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. And then the Bengals stunned the Chiefs 27-24 in overtime. Ben, we did talk before we started recording. You said that you had a couple things that you'd wanted to say about the Bengals beating on the Chiefs. What you got for me, buddy?
I was just really excited to see the Bengals win because the turnaround from last year to this year is crazy. And, Erik was talking about young quarterback. Personally, I think that's the best way if you can do it to succeed in the NFL is to get a rookie quarterback. Because if your quarterback is making that little of a salary but playing so well, you can allocate those resources somewhere else. So, and I think the Bengals are a perfect showcase of, how to do that with how quick their turnaround was. And Joe Burrow is he's so special. And I mean, seeing him and Patrick Mahomes balling out with each other, it was fun. And, when the Chiefs won that coin flip, I thought it was going to be the same situation as it was the week before with the Bills and Chiefs. But it was just a really entertaining game to watch. And I mean, same for the Rams as well, because the Rams late in that game, or the 49ers late in that game could have sealed it. I mean, their safety dropped that interception, and it was a shame. That was also a really, really good game.
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at this conference championship and, actually this playoff as a whole, you realize that, 2 more games were decided by 3 points and 5 out of the total 12 games have been decided by that margin of points. It's been a great playoff this year. Erik, what did you think about, the matchup so far and, more specifically speaking, the conference championship this past weekend?
It's been a great postseason. I mean, the wild card round started out pretty rough with a lot of blowout losses and non-competitive games, but man, it picked up steam, pretty fast there, and every game was close and every game was exciting. And, in terms of the conference championships, I picked the Rams to win because I felt they had the quarterback advantage. And in the playoffs, I always tend to lean who has the better quarterback. And the Rams were at home. They had a decent enough defense, and Matthew Stafford is motivated. And I just think he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. The 49ers had their opportunities. They coached a good game. They kept it close. It was sort of a slugfest. But in the end, Stafford made more plays as I expected him to. And, they earned their way through this postseason, upsetting the Bucs. I thought Stafford played outstanding in that game against the Bucs. And, he really deserves this opportunity after what he had to go through in Detroit. So I'm very happy for him. In terms of the Bengals, I expected them to compete for a Super Bowl, but not this fast. I expected it would probably be another year or so before they were in it because I'm a huge Joe Burrow fan. I was so jealous of the Bengals when they got that number 1 pick, and I knew they were going to get Burrow because I wanted him so bad, but I knew it wasn't going to happen. And, he's such a good quarterback. I saw so much of Tony Romo in him, but with, a much more calm, so good under pressure type of mentality. So I knew he was going to be good. But with their offensive line being as bad as it is, I just didn't think they'd be able to get through the playoffs, but he managed to navigate it. that receiving core is outstanding, led by Jamar Chase. But the real story of this postseason for the Bengals is their defense, the turnaround they've managed to have in the past year. Trey Hendrickson has been a tremendous player. Jesse Bates, just so many underrated players on that defense. And what they did to Kansas City in that game in the second half defies description, because Patrick Mahomes is undoubtedly the best quarterback in the game right now. You just can't argue it. He's been utterly phenomenal pretty much since he stepped on the field, and to shut him down, intercept him like that when it's crunch time, in overtime, when you're gassed, you're tired, they still made a play, and they went on to win the game with a rookie kicker kicking in overtime. I mean, that's just great stuff. And, I'm really cheering for the Bengals. They've endured a lot of pain over the years, not just in the Super Bowl back in the 80s, but, with all the losing they did in the 90s and the brutal playoff losses they had to endure in the 2000s. So I'm really rooting for them. They've earned this opportunity to try and finally win a Lombardi trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, me and Ben have definitely discussed the Bengals and the Rams throughout the last couple episodes. And, you want to talk about Matthew Stafford, and, from our point of view, and, you'll look at the NFC North play, and you'll, like you said, Matthew Stafford had a very rough time in Detroit. Ben and I have talked about that multiple times. So, as for me, I guess I'm kind of in a predicament as to, who I'd like to win in the Super Bowl, just because, I do think Matthew Stafford has a limited amount of time remaining. But I mean, Joe Burrow, what is there not to like about this kid? I mean, he is such a fun person to watch, and then you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It's T. Higgins, if I remember correctly. For some reason I have a problem with remembering players' names on here, but I mean, it's a very, very, electrifying offense, even without, the offensive line that we all thought would need to come into fruition before they come into the playoffs with even a thought of the Super Bowl. So yeah, I'm in a predicament, but it really does sound like, is it fair to say that you're rooting for the Bengals in the Super Bowl?
Team wise, yes, I am rooting for the Bengals because they've never won a Super Bowl. I always cheer for the team that has never won a Super Bowl before because it's a great story. But if we're picking players I'm cheering for, it's Matthew Stafford, 100%. I understand he was with the Lions, he was a rival, but man, what he had to go through with that team and still being the best quarterback by far they've ever had in the Super Bowl era gave them everything he had over those years, all the pain he had to endure. I came to respect him so much. So if I could see him get a ring, that would be really cool, because honestly, I think Burrow's going to have multiple shots at it. So if he doesn't happen to get it this year, I know he's going to be back because he's that kind of player. So, I wouldn't be mad if the Rams won. I wouldn't be mad if the Bengals won. It's one of those rare Super Bowls where I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with that, I'm going to segue into this because you set me up perfectly. Speaking of rings, our weekly news has a pretty, I want to say shocking, just because nobody really believed it considering how long he played, but Tom Brady has officially retired after a crazy mix up with all of the different reports and everything that were coming in. Ben, you did say that you wanted to say something a little bit about this as well. I'm just wanting to pay my respects here as far as his career goes, but what you got for me, buddy?
Yeah, and as a Michigan fan, love to see it. He's, flourished. He's spent, he's been a great, again, undoubtedly the best quarterback to ever play the game. But it was funny because you called it the last episode. You were saying you think Tom Brady was going to retire. But the weird thing about this whole situation, and this isn't the first time it happened this week, because again, it happened later on this week, and we'll get to it. But you had conflicting reports. Adam Schefter came out and said Tom is retiring, he's leaving, and then a few hours later, more reports came out saying, maybe he's not leaving. Adam apologized, saying he jumped the gun. So it was just really interesting. And then eventually, 2 or 3 days later, he ended up officially putting out there that he was retiring. But it was just weird seeing how there was conflicting reports about all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Erik, what are your thoughts before we get into the next couple points here for the weekly news?
It just felt like Tom wanted to do it himself. He's always been a guy who likes to operate on his own terms. So when the whole report started to come out that no, he's not retiring, he hasn't made a decision yet, that was just him sending a message to everybody else that I'm going to be the one who breaks the news, not you. So I had no doubt that Schefter and Darlington were correct in reporting that he was going to retire, but they jumped the gun, like he said. So that's what that whole thing was about. I had no doubt that he probably was retiring. It felt like it was trending in that direction for the past year or so. And, for me, it was always like the only reason he was still playing was to prove a point to the Patriots that he didn't need them to win. And then he goes out and wins a Super Bowl with the Bucs in his first year away from the Patriots. After he accomplished that, there really was nothing left to prove. He's got way more rings than everybody else. He's won a ring with 2 different teams. He's 44 years old. He's got his whole life ahead of him, a very lucrative career, probably in broadcasting if he decides to take it. So it's time to move on, spend more time with his family. And I think he's very much at peace with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to go a little bit out of order just because it just makes sense here. But speaking of Ben's Michigan, Jim Harbaugh just kind of left Michigan, but also kind of didn't. Ben, I mean, the biggest Michigan fan I know, you got to have some kind of viewpoint on this.
Yeah. And again, and this is what I was referring to with the Tom Brady point. The night before, that would have been Tuesday night. People were coming out saying he is getting the job, and it was pretty much consensus that he was getting the job. But then later that next day, it came out that he decided to not get the job, and now there's still conflicting reports out there of whether he turned it down or they didn't offer him the job. But I'm just happy to have him back. I hope Michigan doesn't have to deal with this for the next 10 years, and he said they wouldn't have to, but we'll see. But they actually already hired their new head coach anyways, so it'll work out for them.
It's very funny just because you want to talk about a difficult offseason. You want to look at the Minnesota Vikings for this year alone. I mean, or I mean, even last year too. I mean, they really wanted Justin Fields, obviously didn't fall to them. And then you want to look at different hires. They wanted Ryan Poles as general manager, again, didn't fall to them. And then you look at Jim Harbaugh again, didn't fall to them. So, I mean, in Minnesota is a great team too. I believe that they are built to win now. I definitely think they have a bright future ahead of them. But Erik, I mean, what else you got for me?
From everything I had heard, it's that Harbaugh came into this thinking his stock as a coach was pretty much back to where it was in 2014 after he'd had that great run with the 49ers. He'd just gone 12-2 with Michigan, got them to the college football playoff, had beaten Ohio State. He vindicated himself after so many years of being questioned as a coach. So he probably went in thinking that, the NFL teams were ready to line up for him, and he was making pretty high demands. He wanted, significant control in personnel, and he wanted, an exorbitant contract, like Gruden level type contract from teams. And, unsurprisingly, owners balked at that. They're like, we're interested in you, Jim, but we're not that interested in you. And once he started to realize, that the interest was there, but it wasn't as intense as he was expecting, the Bears started to drift in a different way. The Raiders started to drift in a different way. And once he realized that Minnesota probably wasn't going to work, he's like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm going back to Michigan. And, the Vikings ended up going with Kevin O'Connell. So, it was such a weird ride the entire time. And I'm honestly not surprised he didn't end up getting a job, because to me, it felt like it was either going to be the Bears or it was going to be Michigan, because I felt that the Bears were the one job that he truly coveted in terms of a dream type NFL job, because he played for the Bears for a long time. He respected the hell out of Ditka. So to me, that felt like it made the most sense, much more than the Raiders, in my opinion. So when the Bears sort of fell out of the picture, I felt there's no way he's coming to the NFL. And when the Viking stuff happened, I'm like, there's no way he's going to the Vikings. There's no way. And sure enough, when the news came out, I started laughing so hard because, of course, the Vikings didn't do it. So, he's back where he belongs, in my opinion. I think he's much better off at Michigan if he's not going to be in Chicago as a head coach. So he might end up coming to the NFL down the line just to see if he can get one more crack at the Super Bowl. But I think he's probably where he should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely agree.
I did want to note just before, we transition to the next headline. You did say, I mean, in your opinion that, the Raiders didn't really make much sense. And I am right there with you just because, I think going from San Francisco to, Las Vegas or, I guess you could also say Oakland is, I mean, it's an intense rivalry. And I think that is something that you don't want to touch. So, that's, and I'm sorry for any Bears fans listening, but that's the equivalent of Ditka going to, Green Bay or something, not necessarily skill level as far as coaching, but, just because of what he's done for the franchise and everything. I'm going to read a couple more headlines before we get into our next point that we're going to be talking about. Brian Dabble was hired by the Giants this week. Brian Leftwich was also pulling out of the Jags coaching search. A big one I do want to talk about is the Washington football team changes their name to the Washington Commanders. And there's been mixed feelings about this, throughout all the media and everything. I personally don't mind it. I don't think that it's a terrible name. I think that I was more of a fan of, say, the Washington Red Wolves, for example. But guys, what do I'll start with Ben just because he hasn't talked in a little bit. Ben, what were your, first thoughts when the Commanders came out as the number one? This is what we're doing.
I thought the Commanders was fine. This people kind of knew that this is what it was going to be a day or two before they actually announced it. I think it's fine. I would have preferred DC Commanders better. I just think that sounds a little bit better. And I liked Red Wolves better as well, but it's a fine name.
Eric, any thoughts?
It's a benign name, and after going with the Redskins for so long and trying to defend it, from the newer cultures today, I understand why they went that direction, and it makes sense because you're in Washington D.C., you're the home of the commander in chief, the president. So
Right.
It's a nice little juxtaposition to sort of let everybody know where they're coming from. And I think people will get used to Commanders and it'll start to flow a little bit better. People tend to be a little reactionary to team names. You got to let it sit for a while to see if it, really settles in. And I think this one will end up being fine.
Right. I'm right there with you. And then as we get into our last headline, Josh McDaniels is getting hired by the Raiders as head coach. My only question is he actually going to take it this time, or is he going to back out and go back to where he came from? Ben, you had a point on this one. What you got for me?
I'm a fan of the hire. It goes back to kind of what I was saying about the Bears hire. I think it's a fine hire. I don't think it's a bad hire by any means, but I think they should have just hired Rich, their interim head coach, because I mean they lacked culture for 10, 15 years, even under Gruden. And Rich, when he stepped in as their intern head coach, like pulled that team out of that midseason gutter and was able to get them to the playoffs. And I mean, numerous players came out, talking about their support for Rich. And I think they should have just hired Rich instead of Josh, but I don't think Josh is a bad hire by any means.
Eric?
I do believe it's for real this time with Josh McDaniels for one key reason, and that's because they hired Dave Ziegler as the GM. He's a Patriots guy. He's known Josh for a long time, and I think that's what Josh was looking for in Indianapolis back in 2018. And when he realized he wasn't going to get that kind of setup, in with the Colts, he kind of, got cold feet and backed out, and it was this whole messy thing. So this time around, I do believe he's going to stick because he has somebody he trusts at the top. And for better or worse, Mark Davis is a guy that swings to the fences. He swung for the fences with John Gruden. He's going to do that with Josh McDaniels. And if there's anybody who can maximize Derek Carr, it's going to be Josh McDaniels. So I think it's going to be great for Carr in terms of the rest of the team. I have no idea, because we all saw what happened in Denver. You could argue that he was really young back then, probably wasn't ready at the time. So he's a little older, he's a little wiser, he's more experienced. So I think his second tenure will probably go a lot better than his first in terms of, whether or not he's going to be able to compete in that division. That's another story, because you're going to have to go through Patrick Mahomes. You're going to have to go through Justin Herbert. That's going to be a competitive division for a long time. And, I'm going to have fun watching it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to end this segment, I have one question for you, just because the whole Bears writer gig and everything. Who did after all these head coaching hires, who did you originally want for head coach before Eberflus was hired?
It was so weird, because I was more into the GM search than I was the head coach search, because I didn't really see any gotta have it guy for the head coaching circuit, which is kind of rare. I mean, there were a lot of solid options, but nobody that really stood out as a guy that, oh, I've got to have him. So, in terms of my logical thinking, I'm like, it should probably be Brian Dable, because of what he's done with Josh Allen. He seems ready. He's learned under Nick Saban. He's learned under Sean McDermott. He's learned under Bill Belichick. He felt like he was ready. It's just a question of, was he not interviewing well? Because of, he probably should have been a head coach already, but he ended up going to the Giants, which I think makes more sense in terms of a fit, because he went to Rochester for college. He went to high school in the New York area. So it just felt like a nice fit for that team and that franchise. And, all in all, I wasn't upset by the Eberflus hire. He felt like a guy who was a qualified candidate, but I thought the way Ben did, you probably but maybe should have thought about an offensive guy to sort of mesh with Justin Fields. But considering the last two times that the Bears have tried that with Nagy and Tressman, didn't go well at all. So they're sort of sticking closer to their identity with Eberflus as the higher defensive, tough-minded, that sort of coach. And that tends to work for this team. And it's just a question of, can Eberflus do what some other defensive guys like McDermott, Belichick, and Carroll have done and sort of maximize their quarterback? We'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. So to segue.
Hold on, Ryan.
Yeah, for sure.
Cut you off real quick. One more thing that, it just got big probably an hour before we started recording. We didn't have this on our original list. And this is why I said Eric Bieniemy when talking about Matt Eberflus. The Saints are trying to reach out to the offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, to interview him for their head coaching job.
Wow. Okay. So that's, I think, 2 straight weeks that we've had breaking news on our podcast, even though it's not necessarily, going to be released live or anything, but you're getting our live reactions. That's pretty big for New Orleans fans. Hopefully it goes through and everything works out. Definitely a weird situation over there, as far as cap situation and players. The quarterback's not there, that their franchise quarterback isn't there, and then now their head coach, just kind of left them in a little bit of a rut. But with that being said, we are going to have a little bit of fun this week. It's Pro Bowl week, sorry. So it's really, really hard to predict the outcome of a game where everybody's just trying to have a little bit of fun on their, almost like a vacation type deal for a game, like the Pro Bowl. So with that being said, I'm going to give it to my best friend, my co-host, the biggest college football brain that I know, and then also accompanied by Erik Lambert, which does a fantastic job in the offseason covering mock drafts and, all the rookies and all the buildup and everything that, like I said before, makes Chicago fans want to run through a wall. So I'm going to set the microphone down. I'm going to hand it off to these 2 geniuses and give them their spotlight for Ben's College Corner.
And yeah, I know I was really excited to talk to you, because Ryan was telling me that you're a big draft guy, big offseason guy. And that's kind of my thing. That's what really pulled me into football, because I was a big college football fan, and then slowly but surely throughout the draft got into the NFL, and now the draft is my favorite thing. I'll spend hours reading tens of thousands of mock drafts, trying to find any kind of film I can on prospects. So
Oh,
But
no question. I mean, I've built up an inventory of various places that feature great content in terms of that. So, I always look out for certain people who I feel deliver great scouting reports and scouting reports I trust to sort of tip me off to prospects that I might not have seen initially in terms of who I should be looking at, because they have probably better connections than I do. So, and over the time I've learned, what to look for in terms of mentality, what to look for in terms of, physical attributes. And I have this sort of, I'm not as detailed as some other people are in terms of their scouting reports, but I've always felt I have a certain knack for, identifying specific types of players that I would like on my team. And I'm hoping that the Bears would draft. One I was always proud of was Eddie Jackson, because I was a huge Eddie Jackson fan back leading into the 2017 draft. And when the Bears drafted him, I was absolutely ecstatic. I'm like, oh, this guy's going to be so awesome for them in that Vic Fangio defense. And he ends up becoming an all-pro a year later. So, that was always one of my favorite draft moments that I've always experienced.
yeah. And I want to get to asking you about who you want the Bears to get. But, before we do that, I don't know how much you've kept up with the Senior Bowl this week, but I mean, some of my favorite content comes out of the Senior Bowl.
Sure. I was really happy that they put Jalen Tolbert in the Senior Bowl, the wide receiver out of South Alabama. I am a big fan of his. I got a late start on evaluating prospects for the Senior Bowl, so I'm kind of behind. But Tolbert was one that popped out to me right away. 6'3", good speed, runs solid routes. But most importantly, he attacks the football in the air. He makes tough catches, and he seems like sort of that alpha type receiver who feels like that when the ball's in the air, it's his ball to get. So, he's somebody that really stood out to me. I understand he comes from a smaller program, but I think he's going to be that type of kid that really transitions to the NFL level really well. So I'm hoping the Bears are keeping an eye on him.
Absolutely. And another small school, big wide receiver down there in Mobile that I really like. I don't know if you know much about him, is Christian Watson out of North Dakota State.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's tall.
He's getting all the buzz right now.
Yeah. I mean, he's tall. He's 6'4", but I mean, he can run out of the gym. I really like him.
I mean, FCS players you always got to be careful with them because they play much lesser competition. So it's always a question of, are they dominating that competition? Because if they're dominating that competition, it's like, okay, if they're dominating them, they can probably hang with the big boys. So this week was going to be very important for him, going up against much more established talent from places like Georgia, Alabama, all that sort of stuff. So it sounds like he's performing really well, which is exactly what you want to hear. So, given his size, given his speed, I think his route running probably needs work, which is not unexpected because he's coming from a smaller, program, but he feels like somebody who's going to ascend and maybe even compete for that top 32 spot.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope. And another player getting a lot of buzz coming out of the Senior Bowl, somebody I've liked, but I didn't even think he was going to perform this well, is Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was day 2 of the practice. It's first practice that we're allowed to watch, or that they were streaming. I mean, he went up against another hopefully top 32 pick in Darian Kennard. And I mean, he put Darian Kennard on his butt. I mean, I love watching him. He's a great pass rusher. He can set the edge. He has all the athletic tools. I really enjoy watching him.
Oh, no question. I mean, he looks like one of those rare hybrid types who could probably play 4-3 defensive end or 3-4 outside linebacker. He's got the size. He's got good length. He clearly has a motor because it shows up every time you watch him on tape. So it feels like he's really just starting to scratch the surface of what he can really do. And he's showing everybody that at the Senior Bowl. So he's kind of peaking at the perfect time. And I think this week is going to serve him so well because initially I felt he was probably going to be in the early second round range. But now you really have to start talking, like, as good as this defensive line class is, he might still squeeze himself into that first round conversation.
I sure hope. Another big thing coming out of this draft is there's no established QB1 like we had with Joe Burrow in the past and everything. I'm just wondering I don't know how much you've dug into it because the Bears have Justin Fields now, but I was wondering who you liked, because personally I like Matt Corral. Obviously he's not here at the Senior Bowl, but I was wondering who you like.
It's such an interesting crop because they all have traits that you like. You know, there are some guys who throw so accurately at certain times, Kenny Pickett being one of them. I like Desmond Ridder, although he's a little on the thin side. He seems to throw the ball really well. He seems like a confident type. You got Malik Willis with that howitzer of a right arm of his. He's that traits guy, that guy like a Justin Herbert or a Josh Allen that who might not be ready right now, but if you get him in the right environment, he's probably going to be a stud if he takes to it the way those two did. So it's a really strong crop. I like Malik Willis because of that. I also like Matt Corral. I think Carson Strong has more, capability than people are talking about. It's a decent crop, but there's a lot of questions with some of these guys that you hate to have that but moment, but there's a lot of them with some of these guys. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that some of them aren't going to be good quarterbacks. It's just there's not a lot of guys from like last year or the year before, like a Joe Burrow or not or whatnot, that have that feel of being somebody who's going to be good in the NFL given the right amount of time.
Yeah. And funny that you talk about Malik Willis, because he is, all reports, he is lighting up the Senior Bowl. Everybody is kind of talking that, after this weekend, hopefully he has like supplanted himself at the number one spot. And I don't think it's going to happen, but the news that came out is that the Steelers really love him and they would love to get their hands on him. But I don't know, unless they trade up, I don't think he's getting that far.
You never know. Kevin Colbert might want to go out and, in a little bit of a blaze of glory. He's traded up before, so I wouldn't put it past him to try again. It all depends on how the other teams feel about Willis. He's been projected as a second rounder, but we all know he's going to rise up into the first round because quarterbacks always rise. His talent is going to get him there. And his performance at the Senior Bowl is the first step in that. So I think he's going in the first round, probably. I don't know if he's going to get into the top 10. It might be towards the 11 to 20 range, somewhere in there. So if the Steelers can get themselves into there, he feels like a guy who would be a perfect Steelers quarterback, strong right arm, good for that, tough weather late in the season, and you've got a guy like Tomlin who's developed quarterbacks before. So it makes sense. It's just a question of if somebody will beat them to the punch.
Yeah, I completely agree. And another thing, me and Ryan had a debate, a few podcasts ago about Baker Mayfield. But another thing coming out of this is the Browns interviewed Kenny Pickett, and they really, really like Kenny Pickett. I was just interested what you thought about that.
I like Baker Mayfield. I've said this a couple of times now. He's got that Jay Cutler feel to him in that he's got this unique swagger about him. He's a unique character. When he's on, he's really good. He can be spectacular, but there's other times where he just looks so lost. He looks, I don't want to say disinterested is not the right word, but he just looks off. And that was the problem with Cutler at times. So I don't know if it's a disconnect between him and his coaches or some other, factor that's involved. He was really banged up this year. You really have to factor that in as well. So I think he's probably going to rebound next year, but if Cleveland feels like they might want to not pay him the amount of money they're going to have to pay him, I wouldn't blame him for thinking about going after a quarterback in this draft. And Kenny Pickett would make sense. He's sort of an East Coast, that region type of kid. He's well known in the Ohio and Pennsylvania area, and he's a much more efficient type of quarterback, good for a West Coast style of offense, which Kevin Stefanski sort of likes to run. So the fit makes sense. It's just a question of whether or not they truly believe in Mayfield or whether or not they're just trying to, get a lay of the land and just happen to like Pickett.
Yeah, really, really quick. I said I wouldn't really chime in much, but okay, so about this whole thing, because this idea just popped in my head and it actually kind of makes sense. Do you see Cleveland turning into a situation along the same lines of what San Francisco did? Like a quarterback that's in a tough situation that might have an up and down year that can lead and, potentially, teach a younger quarterback that they might draft? What do you think?
Sort of like what San Francisco did with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick?
I was thinking more so along the lines of Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance from this past year.
Yeah, I think that would make sense, from a logistical perspective. It's just a question of would Mayfield embrace that sort of role? I'm not so sure about that because he seems like the hyper competitive type. When he had a chance to face some competition at Texas Tech, I think it was Texas Tech, he sort of bowed out and just transferred to Oklahoma. So I don't know if he has that in him because he's a really tough competitor and he would prefer to just be the guy somewhere. So Garoppolo is much more, a team guy. I don't want to say team. That makes it sound like Mayfield's overly selfish, but the point being they're two very different personalities. Sort of Garoppolo's much more Alex Smith, willing to mentor, but also competitive enough to say, this is my job until you take it from me. I think Mayfield's just going to say, look, if I'm not going to be the guy here and you're drafting my replacement, just trade me. That's what it sort of feels like with him.
That makes sense. All right, Ben, I'll let you take it from here. I just had that one question.
No, you are all good. Again, if I think if Cleveland ends up doing something the quarterback route in this year's draft, which I would be surprised if they did, I think it'd probably be them drafting probably somebody like Garrett Wilson in the first round at wide receiver because that's something they really need.
Guys, I hate to interrupt you. We've got some breaking news. Doug Peterson's going to be the next coach of the Jags.
Doug Peterson. Okay.
I'm all right. Let's talk about this real quick and then we can jump right back into it. I'm again, as an Eagles fan, I'm for it. I think Doug Peterson, as an Eagles fan, I can tell you his culture is a great culture builder. That's exactly what Jaguars need right now.
I think he got a raw deal in Philadelphia. I really do. He did great work with that team and, he got run out of town by a really tough owner and, a GM who basically had his ear the entire time. So it's unfortunate because he had so much success, but I'm glad he's getting a second opportunity. And, if you're Jacksonville, this hire makes sense because he's much more established. He's less, fancy than Urban Meyer was, and he's not going to be near the same disaster. He's going to be perfect for Trevor Lawrence. It's a smart hire.
All I got to say, I mean, you kind of stole the words from my mouth, is that him and Trevor Lawrence are going to be something that I cannot wait to watch. And honestly, I mean, it's a project. It's going to take some time, but I mean, this team actually might have some potential within the next couple of years. I think that they have, potential to compete with teams like Tennessee and Indianapolis potentially. I just said the same word like 3 times in the same sentence, but it's fine. I honestly think that Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence are going to be that match made in heaven. Whereas when Urban Meyer came in, as an Ohio State fan, I was really questioning the whole Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence deal. Like, is this the guy? Is it going to work out? And we all saw how that went down. But this, I mean, like you said, it makes sense. This is something that I'm not really, I mean, I guess the news shocked me, but I'm not stunned by it because, like you said, it makes perfect sense.
Right. His biggest challenge probably is going to be hiring good staff members because Jacksonville's kind of, doesn't have the best reputation right now. They've missed out on a lot of top coaching prospects because of the whole worry about Trent Baalke, their GM, who has a really nasty reputation when it comes to relationships with coaches. And then, how that entire disaster with Meyer. So Peterson's got his work cut out for him, but he's the type of guy who knows what he has to do. He has to elevate Trevor Lawrence, get a good offensive line in front of him, get him some weapons, and then just sort of work from there.
Yeah. And I agree. And again, like Ryan said, and like what you were saying, it'll be interesting to see how he affects Trevor Lawrence's development. Because again, I mean, I know he's kind of fallen off a little bit here in these past couple of years, but I mean, Carson Wentz's second year, he played phenomenal. I mean, he really helped develop Carson Wentz.
Right.
So you hope he can do the same thing with Trevor.
I'm right there with you. I think Trevor Lawrence is actually going to be shown. I mean, look at Trevor Lawrence's last game, just of his rookie season. I mean, against Indianapolis, he had a pretty decent showing, and honestly, I mean, I think that we can expect more of the same player. I think we are going to eventually get the Trevor Lawrence that everybody thought that he was coming out of his, last year at Clemson. I definitely think He showed a little bit more potential with Urban Meyer out as head coach, but I feel like without all the distractions and everything, I believe that Trevor Lawrence is going to be among that young talent that we discussed before in the podcast and everything. The AFC is jam-packed with young talent at quarterback, and
Oh,
I
man.
am looking forward to all the different matchups that we're going to be able to see in the next 10-15 years.
I mean, holy cow, Mahomes, Herbert, Allen, Burrow, and now if Lawrence, achieves the status you expect of a number one pick, man, that is just a loaded conference. So those are going to be some dog fights in the playoffs, and I'm here for it because that's going to be great football theater. It's a question of, will the AFC sort of NFC, be able to, sort of catch up and reload on their own, because a lot of the old guard are starting to bow out. Breeze is out. Now Brady's out. Rodgers, we don't know what he's going to do. He might, be traded out of town and maybe traded to the AFC. So, there's another one that might bow out. So this is why I'm really hoping Justin Fields becomes good, because there's a huge window here to take, sort of take control of the conference if you can get this guy to be a franchise quarterback. So a fun little subplot to watch.
Absolutely. But with that being said, unless there's any more breaking news within the past 15 minutes, Ben, I'm gonna swing it back over to you to finish up your college corner, and then after that we'll get into our 3 bold takes.
Yeah, just a couple more thoughts, but like I was saying before, I think if Cleveland ends up going the quarterback route, I think the smart thing for them to do is to draft a wide receiver, whoever you like, if it's Garrett Wilson, if it's Treylon Burks or whatever, but then draft somebody like Carson Strong in the second round. That's just my opinion.
It makes sense. I mean, if you're looking for a developmental guy, you'd probably want him in the second or third round rather than going first. That way you can sort of, if Baker ends up sort of rebounding, then you've got another weapon for him. If not, you've got another weapon in place for the guy who's going to replace him. So it's kind of a win-win situation.
Exactly. And another player who's been rising his stock in the Senior Bowl, which I really would have loved to see fall to the Bears, especially you talking about how they want to go on the offensive line, is Trevor Penny. I mean, he is just a big ball of clay out of Northern Iowa. He's done really well, and I was really hoping he was going to fall to you guys, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
I mean, Northern Iowa has produced some pretty impressive offensive line prospects over the past couple of years. So it's not surprising that Penning, I mean, they seem to identify traits really well in terms of offensive tackles. And he's just a big dude. He's physical, he's nasty, and he fits what Ryan Poles would want in an offensive lineman. And he's showing that at the Senior Bowl. He still needs work, but the good news is the offensive line coach they just hired has developed good tackles before. So he'd be a nice little fit. But the way he's playing at the Senior Bowl, the traits he has, he's probably going to go somewhere in the first round. I don't know where, probably in the second half, because he's coming from a smaller school. But if he does slip to the second, that's somebody you definitely got to look at.
Absolutely. And another second round offensive line that I would love to see you guys pick up. And again, he's playing very well at the Senior Bowl, Zion Johnson, the guard out of
I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah.
I mean, so technically sound, much more physical for his size than you would think. I mean, great anchor, solid in pass protection, has a nastiness to him. He checks all the boxes, and plus he goes to Boston College where Ryan Poles went to. So you always have to make that little connection as well. So if he happens to be there in the second round, I wouldn't be upset at all if the Bears made him their pick.
Absolutely. And before we wrap this up, I was just wondering if you were the GM and you got to pick, a prospect, obviously, realistically, who would you want the Bears to pick in the second round?
It's really tough because I'm still evaluating, but I've been a big fan of David Bell, the wide receiver out of Purdue, for a while. I think he's a playmaker. I understand some people might question his speed, but trust me, he's 6'2". He tracks the ball so well. He makes things happen. I think he'd be a fantastic complementary piece to Darnell Mooney. And if they got him, I'd be ecstatic.
I completely agree. I love David Bell.
Ready to run through a wall the third time. Oh my gosh, David Bell is my number one guy for the second round. But I mean, hey, an offensive lineman piece would be crazy good. But Ben, what were you gonna say? I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're all good. I want you to talk to Eric about this as well. Before we wrap this up, I do just want to run through a list of guys I like and don't like past Eric. But Ryan, you should tell him who you like really want for the Bears.
As for free agents or
For the draft?
For the draft. I mean, the
Georgia.
only name that oh man, you got to remind me his name. I know him. He's okay. Basically, he's this big dude.
Jordan Davis.
Yeah, Jordan Davis,
the big
tackle.
Kid from Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's going in the first round. Unfortunately, he's just such a physical specimen. I mean, really you look at him primarily as a nose tackle, somebody who's going to command double teams and really swallow up the run game. But he's much better of an interior pass rusher than he gets credit for. He just wasn't utilized that way a lot at Georgia because he didn't have to. They had other ways to, get that pressure. So, but man, he's the best defensive line prospect in this class. I don't think it's particularly close. And this is a good defensive line class, in my opinion. It's very underrated. So if he somehow fell into the second round, I'd be absolutely stunned. I don't think he will, but if he's there when the Bears are picking, they'd be sprinting to the podium because I think he'd be a great fit for Eberflus's defense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, could you imagine, because you did bring up bringing back Bilal Nichols. And could you imagine a defensive line with Bilal Nichols, that stud from Georgia that I just forgot his name again?
Jordan Davis.
Yeah, Jordan Davis. Sorry. Like I said, college is not necessarily my thing. But then you also have Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack on the outside. And then with Roquan Smith at middle linebacker, I mean, holy cow. I mean, what more do you want? I mean, obviously a secondary that needs work, but I mean, what more could you want out of that unit than it's a dream scenario for me. So,
oh, no question. I mean, you have to remember that Eberflus got great pressure with his front four in Indianapolis, despite not having the best edge rushers. So now you're going to hand him Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack. If they can get a 3 technique who can bring pressure up the middle, I think Nichols is capable of doing that. I don't know if you really haven't seen him play that type of position before, so you really don't know. But there are options in this draft of 3 technique types. So if you can get somebody like that who can bring the pressure up the middle, and then you have Quinn and then you have Mack with this sort of up the field type of rushing defense, man, quarterbacks aren't going to like the Bears very much.
No, not at all. And I did speak to him because we did go and watch the college football national championship together. And, I told him, I said, I would be stunned, just like you said. I mean, Ben said that there's probably no way that he's falling to the second round. And in that case, then probably David Bell would be the route that I would go for reasons that you already said. But, I said that I'm not necessarily worried about it. I mean, if we were to get him, that's totally okay. But I mean, you have to bring up Tonga at some point, right? That, he's done a phenomenal job. And I believe that was his rookie year, just this past season. I think that's been an unbelievable job so far. I got the chance to go and see him in person and everything when they played against the Giants. And I was impressed. I mean, I know that that's a garbage team to go and watch a defense play against, but I'm very, very optimistic about what this defense can look like. And that's why I was so ecstatic when they did sign Eberflus for head coach.
It's a weird thing. I actually think Tonga might be a better fit for the 4-3 defense than Andy Goldman is, because he played up the field a lot more often at BYU. So he understands that style of defense. He knows how to play nose tackle and clog up the running lanes. So I think that experience would serve him very well. I don't know if he'd be the primary choice for the Bears, given he's a 7th round pick from a previous regime. So he'd have to probably earn it. But if they give him an opportunity, I could absolutely see him being a part of their defensive front.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that's going to close Ben's college corner, unless never mind. No, it's not. Ben's shaking his head at me.
No, I just wanted there's some players again. This is more me just wanting to get it on the podcast before hopefully I'm correct. But I just wanted to, I have 5 players that I am higher on than the consensus and 5 players I'm lower on than the consensus. And I want to throw that out there, and Eric, feel free to stop me if you have any thoughts, but The five guys that I'm super high on is a quarterback out of Matt Corral, or quarterback out of Ole Miss, Matt Corral.
Mm-hmm.
I love him. My only concern with him is his RPO heavy scheme. I don't think, he's going to get that, but I love him.
He has a lot of traits that you like: good arm, accurate, all that sort of thing that you need to have in your quarterback. I'm a little concerned that he's 6'1", so he's a little undersized for the position. So you always have to worry about something like that. But he's one of the top 3 guys, no question to me. So I understand why you're absolutely interested in him, because I think the Eagles are probably going to be looking at quarterbacks. Despite a lot of the hype around Jalen Hurts, I think he's not the passer they're going to end up needing if they want to win the Super Bowl. That's just my opinion. I don't know if you agree or not, but he's done well with, the opportunities he's had, but I think they can upgrade if the opportunity ends up coming up. So we'll just have to see where that goes. But if it ends up being Corral, I think that would be a really good pick.
Yeah. Again, I think the most likely thing, I think we're just going to stick with Hurts. But nevertheless, another person I could see another player I could see the Eagles realistically picking is Drake London. I love Drake London. He's 6'4". He can go up and get it, but his yak, yards after the catch, is just, he is explosive. He put up crazy stats, missing the last 4 games, and still won the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year.
Oh, I watched him. I'm a big fan. He's one of my, box wide receivers. I always have a little box I put of a certain number of players from each position that I would absolutely draft. And Drake London is absolutely one of them. 6'5", great wingspan, underrated speed. He's going to remind you a lot of Mike Evans, really, because he is that type of talent. And the fact that he was able to do what he did, despite missing so many games, even makes him more impressive. So he's going to make, whichever team drafts him very happy, especially if he lands on a team that already has a quarterback.
Absolutely. The next 2 guys we both talked about, and Jermaine Johnson and Christian Watson. But the last guy I really like is Daniel Falele. And as an Eagles fan, he just reminds me so much of Jordan Mailata. He's, like we were saying with Trevor Penny, he's just a big ball of clay you can mold. I think he's 6'8". He's hyper athletic. And honestly, the Bears might even be looking into him.
It's possible. I think Falele has a lot of work to do. I think there are holes in his game. He has fundamental issues, especially in pass protection. I think that's a big weakness of his. He seems a little cumbersome, so I think he needs to probably drop some weight, gain some more quickness. But he absolutely has a tremendous upside. If you can get him under the right conditions, he can be a bookend right tackle for a long time.
Absolutely. And then here are 4 players that I'm lower on. One of this is kind of like a hot take, but I've been saying this before the season even started. And again, I still think this player is going to be a good player in the NFL. I'm just lower on him. Derek Stingley, I love him. I think he has the potential to be great, but his last 2 years have been really concerning. The only very good year he had was when he was CB2 behind Christian Fulton. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to be a good player, but I have Sauce Gardner as my favorite quarterback in class.
I can understand that, because you always want to see a guy like this play well, despite maybe the defense not playing well. The problem is he was sort of following the defense's lead in that regard and not playing well along with them. So you never like to see something like that. But if we're talking about talent, it's there. There's no question it's there. Size, speed. He has all the tools to be a really good cornerback. But the question is, what's his motivation? What's his work ethic? Is he really committed to being great at football? Because if not, and he's just content with being good, that's something you got to worry about.
Absolutely. Another player, like you said, I think this defensive line class as a whole is a bit underrated. But the edge specifically, they have some really good players in this edge class. But I'm a little bit lower on George Karlaftis just because he seems like he can bull rush, and that's about it. He has great leadership, but the upside just isn't. I can't see it.
I totally understand. It feels this is just me looking at what I saw of him on film. The power's there. There's no question. He's got plenty of power. I think he'll be a good 4-3 defensive end, probably not a 3-4 outside linebacker type. The power's there. that he's going to need really good hand fighting technique if he's going to be a successful pass rusher in the NFL. And I don't think he has it right now. It's getting there. He's improved steadily, but he still needs to work on that. His burst is kind of, average in my opinion. So it's going to be the type of defense he gets into that's really going to determine whether or not he's a great player. But I do like him. He seems like a good throwback type of, defensive player. He plays with great effort, great motor, and guys like that tend to have pretty solid careers in the NFL. It's just a question of how good is he going to be, and is he good enough to take in the first round? I don't think so, and that's just me personally.
I agree. I think his career trajectory reminds me just so much of Ryan Kerrigan. I mean, obviously, he'll play defensive end, but Purdue and everything, I think he reminds me so much of Ryan Kerrigan. I mean, it's creepy how similar they are.
Yeah.
So, and then the last two players, again, I think all these players that I named are going to have fine NFL careers. I'm just a little bit lower on. Is Kenny Pickett. Again, a lot of people have Kenny Pickett as their quarterback one, but his lack of high-end potential, I'm not a fan of. But also, I think if you're a team like the Steelers and you have every piece around, I think he is the most pro-ready quarterback in this class. I just think he has a lack of upside.
Yeah, that's the thing. He feels like one of those guys who's good at everything but not great at anything. So he's a well-rounded prospect. He's ready to go right now. He could probably play day one. It's just a question of, are you comfortable with the fact that he might not be able to elevate his game much higher than he already is? And this goes back to what I said about being in the right system and the right fit, because if you can get him into like a West Coast type of offense, I think he'd fit that perfectly, because he's known for his accuracy. He can move around, he can improvise, all that sort of stuff. And that would fit a West Coast offense perfectly. But if you're looking for somebody who goes off play action and can throw the ball down the field, might not be the quarterback for you. So it's all about fit with Kenny Pickett to me, because, if you're looking for somebody to carry the franchise for you, I don't know if he's the guy you're going to want to, sort of hitch your wagon to.
Yeah. And then my last guy that I'm, again, lower on is Myjai Sanders, the edge out of Cincinnati. I like him, again, but I think he's the complete opposite of Karlaftis. I think he has good hands, and I think he's quick and explosive, but as soon as a big offensive lineman gets, his hands in the chest, I mean, he's tiny. He's getting driven out of the play.
Which is unusual, because he's 6'5", so you'd think he'd have the proper length to deal with something like that. So you might have to wonder if it's a technique issue, because if it is, that can be fixable, which is encouraging, because he has pass rush skill. There's no question of that. But is he fulfilling his full potential yet? And when you look at Cincinnati, they've never really been known for developing defensive players all that well. So, this is another one of those guys who has a high upside, but he needs better coaching than he's probably gotten to this point. So, he isn't somebody I would probably draft in the first round. He's more of a developmental guy who would probably go in the second or third. And you just hope that your coaching staff will be able to get more out of him than whatever his college staff was able to.
Completely agreed.
All right, guys,
Brian?
with that, now I'm going to move on to our 3 bold takes section. And so with that, for those that may not be as familiar with our podcast, so basically Ben and I have 3 bold takes each. And what we're going to do, since Erik is our special guest on the show, so one of us, Ben or myself, are going to say our own 3 bold takes. Then Erik's going to choose from these 3 which one he'd like to debate about first. So Erik, without further ado, which one of us do you want to know first?
Let's go with Ben.
Let's do it, Ben.
And disclaimer here again, these are bold takes. These are supposed to be fun. Obviously me and Ryan believe in them a little bit, but again, they're bold takes. They're supposed to be fun. Don't take these too seriously.
We also, for sake of discussion as well, we did not go through these behind the scenes. We did not cover these on our own. We come up with these and then we meet and then we improv, argue them just right now. So Ben, without further ado.
So my first one, I think Trayvon Diggs is the most overrated player in the league. My second one, I think if Jalen Hurts if Jalen Hurts stays an Eagle, again, that's barring any trade or draft or something, I think he's going to perform like a top 10 quarterback this year. And then my last one is I think Aaron Rodgers might be a Titan next year.
Really? Oh my.
Yeah.
Of those three, I'd love to debate Rodgers.
So for a really long time, I thought he was going to be a Bronco, especially with the Hackett signing and everything. But I think it was today it came out saying that he bought a house in Nashville, and he said he wouldn't mind playing for the Titans. And I think the Titans have the roster to win now with Aaron Rodgers. I think he's a perfect fit if the Titans decide to pull the trigger on it.
You know, in terms of if you're looking at a team that is a quarterback away from probably winning a Super Bowl, Tennessee has to top that list because they were fantastic this past year, played good defense, good team offense, despite losing, Derrick Henry. So, absolutely, I could see that being a fit. It's not too far from Wisconsin. It's not in terms of travel. He wouldn't have to fly all the way across the country and move himself. So, but I think salary cap is probably going to be a problem in that regard because he's already getting paid a lot of money. So making that work from a logistical point of view is going to be difficult from Tennessee's perspective. It's possible, but you might have to upset your entire, situation on the books in order to make it happen. And it would be a 100% all-in move from Tennessee's perspective. So I could see it happening. But honestly, I think it's probably going to end up being another team. Everybody lists Denver. I think Pittsburgh might be another team you need to watch because Big Ben's contract is going to come off the books. So they're going to start to be looking at a little more salary cap space as well. They've got a good situation with their wide receiving core. I think, Rodgers could really sink his teeth into. I think there are going to be other teams involved for sure, but I can't, decline the idea that Tennessee isn't a contender. They absolutely are.
Dare I say Cleveland is one to watch.
Oh man, that would be something. I don't think personally Rodgers would want to go to Cleveland, but that's just my opinion. But you can't rule them out because they're another team that's probably a quarterback away from contention. So you always have to look at those types of teams. Denver being one, Pittsburgh another, Cleveland, and Tennessee. Those are four absolutely possible options.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Ben.
Ryan will admit it, Aaron Rodgers is great, but I would really love to see if somebody of his caliber play with AJ Brown and Julio Jones, because Julio had more of an off year than what people expected. But I mean, boy, would Aaron Rodgers really light up the league if he had AJ Brown, Derrick Henry, Julio. It'd be fun.
With a running back too, with King Henry back there in the backfield with him, and a defense that actually proved to be, a step higher than last year's, the year before. So I think that's definitely an interesting situation. And honestly, I was going to put that as one of my bold takes, little fun fact. But so yeah, obviously I agree, but I figured it was probably going to be covered at some point today too. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say my three bold takes. So the Rams aren't going to be top 15 next year. I think this year's playoffs is the best playoff ever. And Mitch Trubisky, just because we're Bears guys, right? Mitch Trubisky will be a top 15 quarterback next year.
Wow. That is bold. You know what? Let's debate that. Let's do this. Let's do this right now.
All right. So you look at Mitch Trubisky, right? And we're obviously, we're looking at different teams that need the quarterbacks and everything. And there's different situations that I believe make sense for Mitch Trubisky. Like we said, I think Tennessee is a suitor for him potentially. I think that he could go there and compete for a spot with Ryan Tannehill. I mean, he's a cheap quarterback option that, could potentially wind up well. You look at the quarterback situation in Buffalo, and you also look at, who he's been able to work, or who Josh Allen's been able to work with. And, as far as his development goes, he looks at his rookie stats and everything, and you notice that, what he's been able to do is, as a rookie, he did, the bare minimum. And then, you look at where he's at right now, he's an elite top 5, dare I say, quarterback. Then you look at Mitch Trubisky, whereas I believe he's along the same lines. I believe, he's put up better numbers than Josh Allen did back then. I'm not going to tell you that he has more potential than Josh Allen by any means, but I will sit here and say, who he went to as far as, a team and a coach that are willing to, use him as a backup quarterback and as a project. I think that he's been able to learn from a couple people that can really contribute to his skill set. And I think without a doubt, he has potential to go to a team that can use him correctly and with the right scheme, with a coach that's name isn't Matt Nagy. I think he's got more than enough potential to be top 15.
Now that we have the benefit of hindsight, I can totally understand why people are pointing the finger primarily at Nagy, because his offense was atrocious in terms of its structure, in terms of its organization. And, but I'll also posit this by saying the Bears offense in general wasn't overly talented over the past few years. And I think Mitch needs to shoulder a lot of the blame for why the struggles were happening, because there were a lot of instances where he took horrific sacks. There were a lot of instances where he missed wide open guys, when he should have hit them, when they should have been layups, as, a lot of NFL guys like to call them. And that was something that was consistent throughout, the entire time. Even before Nagy got there, Mitch had a tendency to miss open guys like that and whatnot. You also have to worry about, is he still not able to read defenses? Is he still not able to read coverages properly? And obviously somebody's going to give him an opportunity because he's a former number 2 overall pick. He's still pretty young. He's going to be cheap. Somebody's going to give him an opportunity. That's especially with the uncertainty surrounding this draft class. I think somebody's going to give him an opportunity, but the question is who's going to give him that opportunity, because there's probably not going to be a lot of openings where the entire situation and setup is perfect in terms of the coaching and offensive staff and all that sort of stuff. So he's going to have to take what he can get. And I don't think he's going to end up with the absolute perfect setup like he would have had in Buffalo. So I think one team to watch would be New York, and see if maybe he competes with Daniel Jones, working under Brian Daboll, because he already knows the offense now, having worked there for a year behind Josh Allen. So I think that's going to be a team to watch. You mentioned Tennessee, I guess that's a possibility, but I think, I don't think he'd be an improvement over Ryan Tannehill, despite Tannehill's struggles this year. So I'm not sure in terms of what teams he would end up going to, in terms that would give him an opportunity to start. So his options are going to be limited. And I think both he and Nagy were the problem during their years together. They had a good year together in 2018, and then 2019 and 2020 weren't good at all unless they were facing absolutely atrocious competition. So I can understand why you're that confident that being away from Nagy would sort of lead to those results. My problem is he's probably not going to end up in a situation that's entirely that much better wherever he ends up landing. But that's just my opinion on that.
I think he is the number one most, I guess, hottest quarterback option on the free agent market. But that's just my opinion. Ben, you're making faces at me, man. I need to hear your explanation.
No, again, obviously I'm not a Bears fan. I don't know everything behind the scenes, but I'm just pulling up this random list on NFL.com, and right here they have, so we're going to go to 16 because Tom Brady's gone. They have Matt Ryan ranked at 16. Let's suppose, so you're going to tell me you think Mitch Trubisky's playing better than Matt Ryan next year?
Absolutely.
No.
Love the confidence, man. Love that confidence.
Here's the thing. You can call me biased. You can call me whatever you want. Matt Ryan he's going to be on a downward slope because let's face it. I mean, Calvin Ridley will be traded within the offseason, and I'm sure that we'll cover that. Erik, I'm sure that and I'm pretty positive you've actually reported on the Bears being a top target for, a top landing spot, I should say, right, for Calvin Ridley. And so without his number one wide receiver, with Russell Gage, he's a pretty solid wide receiver, but he's not one of those guys that I would necessarily put all of my hope into. I mean, obviously Kyle Pitts is somebody that is, worth noting, but I don't think just that one Kyle Pitts is going to be enough to, make Matt Ryan better in this situation. Whereas if you have Mitch Trubisky, and I know that you said like you're not entirely sure where he could land, but if you have Mitch Trubisky, say, in an interesting spot. I've been thinking about this since, we've actually talked about it a couple episodes ago in Cleveland, where he could be competing for a spot, maybe, because we've seen franchises put a couple quarterbacks head to head, maybe somebody that doesn't necessarily have an advantage on the other one. I think coming out right now, if you were to put Mitch Trubisky and Baker Mayfield in the same quarterback room, it would be less intimidating to Baker than it would be for like a brand new rookie, like we talked about before. If you were to come in and just be like, all right, well, look, we're going to bring in Mitch. We're going to hold this open quarterback competition and see who comes out. In my opinion, if Mitch were to come out, he's developed enough under the right people that he'd be able to shine under that offense, and, that team would actually do somewhat decent. But there's other teams. I'm not going to get into too much, but Ben, go for it.
Again, I disagree. I don't think I don't want to call myself a Baker hater, but I'm definitely lower on Baker than what other people are. I don't think you'd beat out Baker, but to your other point, other QBs on the market, Jameis Winston, Teddy Bridgewater, Marcus Mariota, I think all three of them are vastly more attractive than Mitch Trubisky, in my opinion. Jameis, for sure. You could argue Mariota, but I think Jameis and Teddy, for sure, are more attractive than Trubisky.
Okay, I can understand Mariota. I think that Mariota deserves another chance somewhere. I don't necessarily want him going back to Vegas just because he's going to be in that, backup role behind Derek Carr, unless
Derek Carr's
go ahead.
Derek Carr might leave. Derek Carr might be going, but
right. I was going to say, unless there was, a potential trade partner in that scenario, Marcus Mariota could be the next starter. I think with, the new head coach coming in, as we noted before, Josh McDaniels has a great offense set in stone for, Derek Carr to play under. And I think it's going to be a lot for Vegas to trade him away right now, especially because he did pretty well with the team in, overcoming the adversity that, was shown through the season and everything, with all the difficulties and losing one of his best receivers, if not the best receiver on his offense. I think that it would take a lot for Vegas to just say goodbye to that and then bring up Marcus Mariota. So in my opinion, I think, yes, Marcus Mariota is an attractive option. I would put him up there with Mitch Trubisky. I think that they are two similar quarterbacks, but as far as your Jameis Winston pick, I definitely disagree. I don't think Jameis
Winston was playing, I wouldn't say very well, but Jameis Winston was playing.
He was exceptional
before he got hurt.
It was
14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions when he got hurt. So he was playing good football.
It was pretty decent. And
he's not going to have Sean Payton wherever he ends up next. So you have to bring that up. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know. Another topic that we could talk about right now, but I'm sure we'll save for the offseason, is will we see a Jameis Winston reunion in Tampa Bay?
Probably not. I think they're going to ride with Trask, who they drafted in the second round. I think they saw Brady retiring in the near future, which is why they drafted him. He's a good prospect. I mean, he has some deficiencies, but I always liked him at Florida. So I think Arians and them are going to see what they have in Trask before considering another option. Maybe they bring in a backup just in case, but I don't think Tampa's probably going to be in the quarterback market too much. To me, I think Washington, I think Pittsburgh, I think New Orleans, those are the 3 teams you probably watch for something like that. And then, maybe there'll be a couple of surprises like always on the market. So if it's one of those 3 teams, I think Mitch's best chance to have success would be either in Washington or in Pittsburgh, because I love Ron Rivera. I think he's a fantastic football coach, and I love Mike Tomlin, as he's proven he's a fantastic football coach. So if he ends up in one of those places, he might have a shot at, fulfilling your prediction. But, anywhere else, I really don't see how he's going to, be able to elevate his game enough to be a top 15 quarterback.
Okay. Ben, any closing statements before we get into our last fun segment?
No, I said my piece. I think you're crazy, but I mean, confidence is important.
Now, me and Ben both talked about this just earlier this week. We like to end our podcast on a positive note, and with that, we have a segment called the Gridiron Goofs, where we don't necessarily have to talk about football here. We can, but sometimes it won't be. For example, last week was the Little Debbie Snack Cake Playoff, and now what we have is something similar to that, and it's the fast food region of the bracket, which is, it's 16 teams, and we're going to talk about which one will come up as the best fast food chain. So, Erik, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to ask you different matchups and everything, and then Ben, if you want, you can do mine and then I'll do yours later. Yeah. So without further ado, Erik, do you prefer Chick-fil-A or Arby's?
Oh, Chick-fil-A.
Okay. All right. Panda Express or Domino's?
Domino's.
All right. We're going to break this down by section. So Domino's or Chick-fil-A?
Domino's.
Domino's.
Wow.
Okay. He's a Domino's guy.
Yes, sir. Particularly since they changed their recipe. Before that, I wasn't a Domino's person, but once they changed their pizza recipe, I got on board.
Might I ask you, before you were a Domino's person, who did you side with?
Oh, Domino's isn't my favorite pizza in terms of fast food. It's always been Pizza Hut. I've been a Pizza Hut loyalist forever. So
a little backstory here. So I work at a Papa John's chain.
In I hate region. Papa John's. No offense. I hate Papa John's so much.
We both worked at Papa John's.
Yeah, we ended up, after several months of me working at a Papa John's, I got Ben to work with me there. We had a blast, and then he went off to college. But definitely a Papa John's guy. But all right, so Five Guys or Subway?
Oh, Five Guys. I'm a huge Five Guys fan.
Okay, Chipotle or Checkers?
Ooh, I like Chipotle.
Okay, and then Chipotle or Five Guys?
Five Guys.
Five Guys or Domino's?
Oh boy, that's actually tough. I think I'll go Five Guys.
Okay, all right.
I love their burgers. So,
little fun fact here: I used to work at a Five Guys as well before I worked at Papa John's. Yeah,
there you go. So you've gotten around them fast food places, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. That was
paying your dues.
Yeah, I have to try out every recipe. Let's see. So Popeyes or In-N-Out?
Oh, Popeyes. I love Popeyes.
Wendy's or White Castle?
Wendy's.
Okay. So Wendy's or Popeyes?
Oh God, don't do this to me. Wendy's. I'm a Wendy's loyalist.
All right. So Sonic or Pizza Hut then?
Pizza Hut.
Okay. McDonald's or Jimmy John's?
Ooh. Wow, I love both. I'm gonna go Jimmy John's.
Okay, all right. Jimmy John's or Pizza Hut then?
Pizza Hut, yeah. Sorry, Jimmy John's.
All right. Did you, just to remind me, did you say Popeyes or Wendy's for that last one?
Wendy's. I said Wendy's.
All right. So, oh wow. Okay, my memory's awful. Okay, so you said Pizza Hut and then Wendy's.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's the next matchup then.
Oh boy. In terms of nostalgia, in terms of still loving it, I've got to go Pizza Hut.
All right. So then in that case, we're down to the two pizza chains, Pizza Hut or Domino's.
I thought he said Five Guys.
Five Guys or Pizza Hut. Sorry. Like I said, the memory, whatever.
Oh man, this is so tough because I love them both. In terms of history and in terms of all that stuff, Pizza Hut. I grew up on Pizza Hut, so I'm a loyalist.
So Pizza Hut wins Eric's side of the bracket.
There you go.
Wow. All right. Ben, I sent you
All
over
right.
the bracket.
Yes, you did. All right. Oh, fun fact too. Ryan also worked at Chick-fil-A.
For a month. Okay, it was a rough month, and we're not getting into the details there.
Chick-fil-A or Arby's?
Another time.
Yes.
Chick-fil-A, and I'll tell you why just briefly. And it's not because of their fried chicken, it's because of their grilled chicken. Their grilled chicken is so good it's the grilled chicken club. If you guys ever go, it's not dry, it's that perfect amount, and you get the bacon and the lettuce and everything.
Of course. You can't
really
get anything
good.
without bacon.
Yeah, for sure. Makes everything better.
All right. Panda Express or Domino's?
Eric's gonna hate me for this, but I'm taking Panda.
Oh, you want the Chinese? Nice.
All right. So Panda or Chick-fil-A?
Chick-fil-A for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Waffle fries too.
Oh yeah.
There you go. All right. Five Guys or Subway?
All right. With this, I'm gonna go with a little bit of a shocker, and I'm gonna make it my way. And I believe that's the chain for Subway. No, wait, no, it's not. That's Burger King, isn't it? Whatever. Anyway,
so Subway.
Yeah, we're going Subway, but I messed up. This it was Eat Fresh, not Make It My Way. What are you talking about? Whatever.
Chipotle or Checkers?
I don't. Okay, I believe I've had fries from Checkers, and I think that's, I don't know. That's all I remember, but I'm going Chipotle for that.
All right. So Chipotle or Subway?
Okay, this is they make it in front of you, and that's what I like about it for both of these. But I'm going Subway just because my stomach isn't turned upside down after I eat it. So
all right.
I respect that.
Yeah. Speaking of fast food restaurants that turn your stomach upside down, Popeyes or In-N-Out?
Give me Popeyes because I
Nice.
really like the rice and the red beans and rice as the side.
All right. Have you had In-N-Out before?
I haven't, and that's probably the clear reason why I'm picking Popeyes.
Same, but I love Popeyes too, so it was kind of a double whammy for me.
All right.
Wendy's or White Castle?
Give me Wendy's.
Nice.
All right. So Wendy's or Popeyes?
A little bit of a shocker here, but I like Wendy's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of the Baconator.
It's
Hell
good.
yeah.
Sonic or Pizza Hut?
My girlfriend's gonna kill me for this one, but give me Pizza Hut just because I'm not a big Sonic person.
I get that. Sonic's kind of overrated.
No. Oh. All right. McDonald's or Jimmy John's?
I love me some Jimmy John's, but I'm going McDonald's here.
Classic.
Can't beat the fries.
Oh man,
Yeah,
fries
true.
have always been legendary.
Yes.
Unless you reheat them, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
And it's really bad. They get all soggy. It's but Pizza Hut or McDonald's?
Never a fan of Pizza Hut. Always a Papa John's guy, so I'm staying loyal. Give me McDonald's.
All right. So Chick-fil-A came out at top, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Chick-fil-A or Chipotle?
I think it was
Subway.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A or Subway?
If it wasn't Subway, well, I'm making it Subway, and I'm still going Chick-fil-A.
There you go. Oh.
There you go. And then was it Wendy's?
Mm-hmm.
It was McDonald's and Wendy's on this side.
Wow, burger chains for the win, huh?
I guess.
See, here between McDonald's and Wendy's, the burgers are fine. I gotta go with the better fry, and that's McDonald's.
See, it depends. The plain fry, I agree, but the Baconator fries are right. So you're the 1 and 2 seed here. McDonald's versus Chick-fil-A.
It depends really, because right now I guess I'll go with McDonald's just for the win, just because it's classic. I love the fries. You can never go wrong with it, and it's cheap.
Nostalgia, man. It's been around forever.
Right, and the Coke's always good there too. I don't know what it is about it, but right now I'm feeling McDonald's. Sometimes I could say Chick-fil-A. It just depends on what I'm feeling. So
All right.
McDonald's is coming out in my bracket. But Ben,
How about that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, let's run through yours. So Chick-fil-A or Arby's,
Chick-fil-A.
Oh.
Panda Express or Domino's.
Chinese makes me sick, so we're doing Domino's.
Okay, so Chick-fil-A or
default, huh?
Domino's then.
Yeah, just any. I got a stomach flu one. It was bad. Not gonna go into detail there.
Thank you.
Hey, I
Thank
respect
you.
that, man.
Chick-fil-A or Domino's then.
Chick-fil-A. Yeah.
All right. We've had this conversation before, actually.
Yeah.
That's funny. Five Guys or Subway.
Five Guys.
Nice.
I was gonna say, I know my buddy
Yes.
here. Chipotle or Checkers then.
I've only had Checkers a few times. I'm gonna be honest, I'm disappointed. So we're doing Chipotle.
Wow. Okay, so Chipotle or Five Guys then.
Five Guys.
Yeah.
All right. Five Guys or Chick-fil-A. To go into the finals.
Five
Who's
Guys.
going?
Yes.
Five Guys. Okay.
Yes. Hell yeah.
You know, I got nothing bad to say about Five
Yes.
Guys food, man. They're
It's a-
good.
It's
I agree
rock
with Erik on
solid
this.
fast food, man.
Yes, it is.
Anytime I get an opportunity, I'd love to go to a Five Guys.
For sure. Popeyes or In-N-Out.
In-N-Out. I'm a from the West Coast. In-N-Out's there, every corner. I love me some In-N-Out.
There you go.
Wendy's or White Castle.
Wendy's.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Sliders
so
just make me
Wendy's.
sick. Sliders are just
Oh yeah.
can't do
They
it.
They're
slide
not good for
right
your
at-
colon, I'll tell you that. Bro.
Yeah. All right. So Wendy's or In-N-Out.
In-N-Out.
Mm.
Okay. Sonic or Pizza Hut.
See, you guys are bashing on Sonic, but Sonic. There's so much versatility in Sonic. I gotta go with Sonic.
And they got the
So-
tots.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And it's all fun
yeah.
and games though until one of them rollerblades into the side of your car and spills their slushy all over your lap. But McDonald's or Sonic.
You didn't even let me pick between McDonald's and Jimmy John's. You just assumed.
sorry. Yeah, you know
No,
what?
you're right.
I'm-
No, you're
I'm
good.
just
You're
right.
good. I'm only.
Anyway,
You just
only
wanted to
kidding.
complain.
hey, you know what? Hey, I will say this though. That's unfair, but because me and Ben, we eat Jimmy John's all the time when we go over to his place.
Oh yeah. I love
Um,
Jimmy John's. Good
So the
place.
nostalgia's there. It's a good, but it's an unfair matchup.
It is.
Um,
I mean, it's classic.
Yeah. So McDonald's or Sonic then? You said that, right?
Yeah. So Sonic.
Mm.
Okay. Sonic is coming out. All right. So Sonic or In-N-Out.
Oh.
Here we go. Decision time.
We're doing In-N-Out.
Stuck to his roots.
Yeah.
Ooh, all right. So In-N-Out or Five Guys.
Oh man.
So this is Eric. Have you ever had In-N-Out?
I wish I have. My sister has. My mom has because they've traveled to the West Coast. Unfortunately, I've never gotten the opportunity.
I've heard nothing
So-
but good things too.
Oh,
by the
I've
way.
heard a ton of great things. It's just I've never, I wish they had at least one around here, but they don't.
It's so similar to Five Guys. I mean, like they're basically sister restaurants.
Well, then I'm sure I'd love it.
Yeah. But which one's better?
That's tough. I haven't had In-N-Out in probably 4 or 5 years. We're gonna go In-N-Out though. Yep.
Stuck to it.
In-N-Out.
Stuck to his guns. There you go.
All right.
Yes.
So with that, we are going to conclude this week's episode of the Pigskin Project. We hope you guys enjoyed what we had to offer. We have a lot scheduled for next week's show, including our reactions from the Pro Bowl week, Super Bowl previews and picks, and much, much more. So make sure you're subscribed or following us on all platforms. We'd like to give a big thank you to the talented Erik Lambert for coming on the show and Anchor.fm for helping us promote our podcast. Please leave a review down below as it helps us more than you know. And that's it for this week. So thanks again for tuning in to the Pigskin Project. Stay warm out there, people. There's some pretty crazy weather coming our way. So, all right, on to Super Bowl week. We'll see you guys next week.